Welcome, Michelle. I am thrilled to be connecting with you and talking to you.
I know. I'm really excited to be here. This is a great way to spend my late afternoon on a Friday with you.
Right? We are recording this on a January Friday when it's still nice and cold outside. So we're
Yes.
cozy inside. Well, thank you for your time. And maybe let's kick it off with why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about what it is that you're focused on right now?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start off that I'm a registered nurse and I still identify as a registered nurse. But in 2018, I started my own leadership development, coaching, and consulting business called Kara's Consulting. And I did that because I was leaving an organization who there was a group of physicians that were working there, and they asked me if I could create and deliver some curriculum for them, which I'd never done before. But I sort of did that whole fake it till you make it thing and said, sure, I can do that. And I came home, and my husband, who is an entrepreneur, told me, well, you have to start a business. And I said, I'm not starting a business for one client. Do you know how much work that is? And he said, yes. And you're starting a business. So I started a business for that one client. And I thought that I would be doing what most consultants I had been seeing doing up to that point in my industry, which is in healthcare, which is creating policies and procedures for organizations and creating curriculum and in some cases delivering it. And I thought that would be my dream because I love to deliver curriculum. I love to facilitate groups. I love to create it as well. And when I had this client, they're amazing, and I still have them as a client, but I didn't like delivering curriculum every day. And so I thought, gosh, well, this is a bit of a sucking the air out of my balloon. This is what I thought I always wanted to do. And it took me a while to go back to what, when people talk about what's your why. And I think that for some people, it's important to know what your why is because it gives you the focus that you need in your business to really niche down, and other people don't know what it is, and that's okay too. So for me, I really thought about like, what's the why? Why do I want to do this work? And what's going to give me that feeling of wanting to get up every day? And it took me back to a time in my early career when I moved. I'm in Canada. So I moved from Ontario to BC. And for anyone who doesn't know Canadian geography, that's like from the East Coast to the West Coast. And I started a new job that was going really well. I was overseeing care at a long-term care home here for seniors. And in a couple of months, the attitudes of the staff just started to really shift. And I couldn't figure out what was happening because I was doing all the things that more senior leaders were telling me that I should be doing in terms of engaging people and trying to create this like happy workplace. And I came into work one day and I was told by my admin assistant that licensing was on their way to do an inspection, which here in Canada isn't unusual because sometimes they just come to check to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But on this day, they weren't doing that. They were coming to investigate me because one of our nurses had accused me of covering up the death of a resident. And it
Wow.
was in that moment that I realized how ill prepared I was to lead this completely dysfunctional team. And I had this feeling of like, why would someone do this to me? Right? Because all I had been doing for months is trying to create this positive workplace. So when this nurse was interviewed by these investigators who determined that, in fact, I was not guilty of what I was being accused of, and there was zero evidence to show that, she said, well, we thought that if we could get her fired, even though we like her, things would go back to the way they were. And it was then when I realized that most employers hire people like me because they have the core capacity to do the job well. And they figure they're just going to figure the leadership piece out. And you don't. And it's hard to do that. So, in typical Leo fashion, I knew I had two choices. I could either quit and go work someplace else, knowing that I would likely end up in another toxic work environment, or I could dig my heels in and try to figure it out. So you can probably figure out based on where I am that I picked the latter of the two. And really, over the last 17 or 18 years, I have really taken um, education that I've learned from other people, but mostly research. Because of my nursing brain, I really want to make sure that I'm giving people evidence-based research that I know is going to work. And most of it is in the foundations of behavioral organization. So, how does our brain work? How are we hardwired to connect? How do we create safety and trust and belonging really, really quickly so that leaders can implement some of these things? But the other side of that is that leadership is more of an inside job than it is an outside job. And we're leaders in all facets of our life. So the work that I teach about isn't really just for people in the proverbial boardroom. It's for anyone who has a person that
Mhm.
they have influence over. So
Yeah,
that sort of led me to the work that I'm doing now.
that's a beautiful description, and thank you for that. Let me ask you this, the situation you described, was that your first, like, management leadership role?
No, I had had another, I think two other leadership positions before that. But this one was really one that I felt like the employer kind of took a chance on me because I had interviewed several times on the phone and even remotely, like through video, which I mean, that was in 2006. So that really wasn't something that most employers did at that time to do virtual. But I was living on the other side of the country. And so they did do a couple, they even flew me out at one point to interview me. So, I mean, I think that I wasn't intentionally set up for failure in this case. It's really just, I think, a nature of how most organizations hire their people. They're hired based on, can you do the core capacity of the job?
Mhm.
And so, I was able to do that. And unfortunately, then I found myself in a situation where it was just a really dysfunctional group of people who had learned to act in a way that got them the outcomes they were hoping for. So I learned that I was the seventh general manager in 6 years. So they were used to a lot of turnover and change. They didn't really feel like anyone was committing to them
Mhm.
because people were leaving all of the time. And I really think that in my experience has been in researching other people's evidence and research on leadership is that when people behave badly, it's generally because it's fear based. They
Mhm.
generally feel that there's something to be fearful about. So I always kind of say, think about it if you're a parent or if you know someone who's a parent of a toddler and you ask them to do something new they've never done before, or you say no and they're tired, you might elicit like a full blown temper tantrum. And
Mhm.
it's generally just because their nervous system's not able to manage that at that time, or you're asking them to do something they've never done before. And adults are no different. So again, when you understand those pieces of how our brain works, it makes it really easy to become a really effective leader in all aspects of your life.
So tell me, because it's very interesting, right? When it comes to um, people looking for jobs, obviously interviewing is a piece of this, and understanding and knowing as much, evaluating and assessing the culture, right? Really what's going on and what you will be walking into is kind of a key step. So I'm curious, were you aware of what you were going into? Because I mean, that dysfunction, like you said, existed, that kind of toxicity existed, and the problem existed before you joined. Was that disclosed to you as like a problem that they need solving for?
No, in fact, I was told the very much the opposite is that things were going really, really well, which made it more difficult for me when things started to go sideways, like when the wheels of the bus felt like they were starting to come off, because I thought, well, gosh, I've only been working for this organization about 3 months. What is this employer going to think of me? They barely had a chance to get to know me. They think this building's running really well, and I'm telling them that it's not. So maybe they're going to think it's because of my poor leadership or my inability to lead these people. So no, it wasn't disclosed. And again, I don't think it was done intentionally. Like I actually just don't think they knew. I think that on the surface, like many organizations that I work with, on the surface, things look like they're okay. It's only when you start to kind of peel back those layers like that onion that you start to realize how much dysfunction is there or how much lack of trust and support and the lack of shared and core values. And I think that once you kind of peel some of those layers back, it becomes really evident that people are functioning based on a premise of, I'm just going to get through today. And this is about me supporting me. I'm not here to worry about anyone else anymore.
So hindsight is 2020, of
Yeah.
course. And I've been in a situation in a similar where a leader thought or told me that things are operationally just fine,
Mm.
just to find out completely a different story from clients, and so how can people, right? Because culture is so important, um, and of course, one can have an optimistic attitude and all these tools, but it can also be very detrimental and very sometimes the story doesn't end that way, where you're like bring all the tool because it can be very toxic, and do some damage on people when they join cultures and leadership like that. But how in hindsight, what would you advise people when they interview? Because this is a very tricky thing. You only have few conversations, right? Before making a big decision, right? Of where you will spend many hours of your day once you accept the job, right? It has a big influence on your quality of life. In hindsight, what could you have asked to kind of determine or pick up on what was really going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question because as you said, hindsight is always 2020. And I don't know that there's anything that I could have done differently to know what was happening because I feel it's almost sort of like you don't, when like when you get to know people, you don't really know what's happening in their home kind of behind closed doors until you really kind of get in their space. Like, I don't know that I would have ever known that through the employer until I got in there because I don't even think they knew.
Mhm.
That said, I think that it's important that during the onboarding process of being interviewed or interviewing someone, it's important to kind of state that this has to be a good fit for both sides. So I want people asking me questions during an interview that I'm interviewing them for because I want to see what are they curious about and what kinds of questions are they asking me that align with their values so that I start to get a little insight into terms of like who is this person and what makes them tick. So I think it's like really important to ask questions on both sides at the beginning. And I think that when you are starting to work for an organization, I think it's a good idea to go online and check them out and see what they stand for. And if there are reviews, are there some commonalities? Are there things that people are talking about that maybe they've had a really great experience or maybe not such a great experience? And what are those? Are there themes that start emerging there for you? Um, I those are I think the things that I would go to first in terms of what could people do. Questions I think that I would ask somebody as part of an interview would be if you were in a situation where you disagreed with someone or there was some type of conflict, how would you manage that situation in a way that felt respectful? As opposed to like, give me the questions I've always had is, can you recall a time when you disagreed with someone in the workplace and how did you deal with that?
Yeah.
And I think that when you change up the language a little bit and you say, how would you deal with that in a respectful way? There's a whole lot of other layers to that. That person needs to understand what does a reciprocal and respectful conversation look like? Does it involve emotional intelligence? Do I know what emotional regulation is in terms of being consistent in my approach and not flying off the handle and not having a you do as I say approach. Like there's different things now, I think, as a more seasoned leader that I'd be looking for and nuances that I'd be looking for that I can pick out now. If someone's just giving me a canned response, they've gone to the internet or if they've gone to chat, CPG and they know what to say versus being able to see it in their body language and the nuances in the voice and the way that they carry themselves. I think that for me is what I've been able to develop and create that helps me now navigate that space a little bit better in terms of finding people that are a good fit for my organization and for other organizations, but also in my ability to coach people that when they're looking for a new job or they're transitioning from a job, to not end up in another place that they're ending up not going to like in 6 months or a year is how do you do the research that you're responsible for doing to make sure that you're going to be in an organization that aligns with your core values. And so I think that every person on the planet needs to know what their core values are.
Okay.
Because once you know what those are, it really helps to drive decision making. It makes decision making in all facets of your life way easier because you know then every decision you make is based on that North Star. It's based on those non-negotiables. You don't have to question yourself. Am I doing this because I want this person to like me more? Or am I doing it because I don't want them to be mad at me? Oh
Mhm.
gosh, I'm mad at myself. I didn't set the proper boundaries. Whenever you know what that North Star is and you're making those decisions, it just makes it a lot easier. It kind of takes it out of your hands. And I think then it helps you align with other people, organizations, and individuals that are going to pour into those core values and support you.
Mhm. Oh, I love that where you're taking this. I want to ask you, can you give an example, right, of the core values, right, and how it ties into making your job selection, right, your job search easier, decision. And I want to also tie it into, of course, every company says the right things on their website. Of course, they say that they have the right values and
Yeah.
perfect collaboration and respect and diversity and all the good stuff.
Yeah. And I always say to people, like, core values have to be more than a banner or something that's posted on a wall. And when you do polling, like a lot of large organizations have polled their people, and I think it's like over the like 80% of large organizations, their employees can't give them one word that's part of their goal or their mission statement. Like so they create them and they put them on the wall and they feel good about it, but it's actually not a lived experience because it's not something that people carry through their everyday work to say, this is just how we show up for each other. This is just embedded in what we do and who we are. And I think that when you create that space for people, that's the secret sauce. That's where you start to create workplaces that people never want to leave, which is my goal. So to answer your question, I'll use myself as an example. So my core values, my North Stars are one of them is integrity. So I need to know that I'm working for an organization or I'm going to be engaged in organizations that have transparency, that are showing up with a level of integrity that will align with my values. So they say what they mean and they mean what they say. They walk the talk, all of those things. Another one is humility and curiosity. So by that I mean, how would you know if an organization shows up with humility? Well, I think that for me it's really about, do I come to the organization and somebody is curious about, why did you want to work here? What was it about our organization that drew you? Or is there anything that you see that we could be doing differently or better? Right? Or if they ask me, hey, what was your experience like during the onboarding process? Is there
Mhm.
anything that we could do a little differently that would have been better? And that's regardless of whether I get the job or decide to take the job or not. When people like that follow up and ask those questions, that shows a lot about the organization. Community is a big one for me. Do they give back? Are they engaged in community? Do they work with community partners? Do they encourage small businesses to be part of, their circle and their influence? And then fairness and equity is a big one for me. So, how do they treat their employees? Does everyone feel that they have a voice? Do they have a good DEI program in place? And then fun and humor. Everybody wants to have a good time. It doesn't need to be so much so that people aren't productive and they're not getting their job done. But I think that when you can instill some humor and fun, it gives people the opportunity to see other facets of people that they work with. And the research shows that we spend more time often with our work friends than we do with our friends outside of work or even our family in some cases. And sometimes that's that's by choice, and other times it's not. So I think it's really important for people to be able to see different parts of the people that they work with. And so I generally tell people that I work with, clients that I work with, to ask 3 questions. So you can ask yourself, if you're working, if you want to work for an organization or you're working for an organization. So in this case, when I was a manager in the case that I gave earlier, the first thing that I did when I decided to stay was I thought, okay, I don't want to interview these people because they've quite frankly kind of hurt my feelings.
Right.
And I was having panic attacks going to work every day because I thought, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to right the ship. So the first thing I decided to do was to face it head on. And I sat down with every single person in that building for 15 minutes and then did a one on one. And I asked them three or four questions. And so the three primary questions I asked them: what is the experience that you want from work? What is the experience you're currently getting at work? So that helped me identify where's the gap, right? What do you want to be able to create this like space? Like, what do you need at work that will make you want to come to work every day? And then what are the things that make you feel happy and joyful at work? Like, what are those things that you need to feel happiness and joyfulness at work? And when I was able to kind of pin down some of those types of questions, it gave me a better ability to go back and look at where were the threads that I could pull through, where were the commonalities, where were the gaps. And then I was able to just focus on those pieces as sort of my quality improvement initiative, so to speak.
Mm, I love that. Those are great questions for any leader, any manager, right, who might be facing a challenging environment or situation. So thank you for sharing those. Um, Tell me, so you said, I loved how your husband said you are starting a business. So did you ever, so what is your purpose? Like right now, where you are, based on what you're doing right now in your experience, right, in this moment, what would you say is your life's work? What is your purpose?
Well, I think that there's two aspects, and I'm still sort of teasing this out. So I appreciate the question. I mean, I think that on a more formalized way, the bulk of the work that I'm doing is really to create safe workplaces that I said already that people never want to leave, so that people are not just going to work, they're flourishing. And this is because we don't get to separate our non-work self versus our work self. We're showing up as our whole selves, whether we want to or not. And so my goal is to be able to create safe spaces where people can show up as they are and still feel connected, that they're part of community, that their work has purpose beyond themselves. They've got a work buddy and someone to have their back, like all of those core fundamental things that we all want. The
Mm,
other side of it is that as a woman and knowing the struggles that I had, and because I was a bit of a late bloomer in the entrepreneurial space, I know that part of the struggle I had was people-pleasing tendencies, having a strong sense of perfectionism, inability at times to create clear boundaries or healthy boundaries for myself, which made me just feel stuck and created these narratives, quite frankly, that this wasn't going to happen for me, but it could happen for everybody else. And that I was going to be a nurse for the rest of my life, which is fine. I love being a nurse and I still identify as a nurse. And I had this like calling that I wanted to do something else and never thought that it could be for me. And thank heavens for my husband who pushed, but that button a little bit, because had he not pushed me, I don't think I would have started the business.
mhm,
And I certainly would have never thought of doing this work as anything other than a side hustle because I didn't think that I could. And so he said to me at one point when I was kind of pushing back and saying, no, I don't want to start this business. I don't want to start this business. This is crazy. And I said, it's a side gig, like it's one client. And
mhm,
he said, well, why does it have to be a side gig? And it literally felt like someone slapped me across the face when he said that,
mm,
because I'd never considered that there was any other option.
mhm.
And I think that sometimes those are gifts that we can give to people when we let them know, like there's door number two, maybe even three and four. So try it and see what happens. So I say that because part of the business that I do is so entwined in leadership being an inside job. I believe that we can't create safe spaces for people and know how to create a safe container for others if we're not taking care of ourselves and we don't understand how our own brains work in terms of the stories we tell ourselves and that maybe self-deprecating story that we've kind of carried. The perception of how we view the world is really going to create the lens by which we can engage with other people in a healthy way. So sometimes I believe that we got to start there before I can take leaders to the next place and help them be able to show up really well in a more formal space. And as I said earlier, we're leaders no matter where we are in our life. So I need to know how to lead my husband, my family, my, stepchildren, friends. It doesn't, if I go to the bank, I need to know how to engage with people and communicate in a way that's going to make me want to create more meaningful relationships with people. So I hope that answers your question.
I love that. Um, so it's, can you tell us the story of how you got into management, like from, you know, what I gather it's being a nurse and kind of how was that journey?
Yeah, it was, a kind of a windy road. I graduated from nursing school with the intention of working in the hospital. When I graduated, I was working in ICU as an ICU nurse. And here in Canada, the year that I graduated, the government decided that we had too many nurses in the province and they were cutting 2,000 jobs. And
Oh,
so I ended up becoming one of those new grads that couldn't find work because I was competing for work with people who had many more years of experience than I did. And most places that I was looking at working in the hospital were unionized. So I just didn't have the seniority. So I ended up going to work for a home care agency and became a end of life and palliative nurse. So I spent 5 years actually supporting people transition to kind of the next life, right? And that I loved it. And it gave me a totally different perspective on life because a lot of the patients that I had at that time were dying from HIV and AIDS. That was well before there was a cure. And when you see people dying that are the same age as you grow up pretty darn quick. Like you mature pretty quickly. And I think that I realized that there was just a lot of things that I wanted to change in our healthcare system that I didn't have access to. And there were managers, like I said, that I also had that were supporting me that weren't really supportive. And as a new graduate, working in someone's home in the middle of the night, if you run into a problem and you're the only nurse, you hope that if you call a more senior nurse, they're going to be there to support you. And many times I didn't get that support. And so for me, it just left me feeling like if I'm ever going to be in a leadership role, I'm never going to be that person. Like I'm never going to be the person that makes someone else feel scared to call because they might get in trouble or afraid that they don't know what to do. And it was just, I think, one of those things that as I became more comfortable in my role, I started looking for new opportunities. And it just sort of led me down the path. I started doing case management for a health authority in a different province. And I was working a lot with children with developmental disabilities and those that were, on the spectrum, like autism and Asperger's, and those that had terminal illnesses. They
wow.
were medically fragile kids. So I was able to combine those two worlds together, and it really helped me understand sort of the business side and leading and having people that I was responsible for on my team. And I think just as you start to get in that space, you evolve, you get more comfortable, you take one more little baby step into something that seems really scary and hard, and then you do that for a little bit, and before you know it, you find yourself in a VP of operations role.
So when you reflect back now on kind of all experiences that you've had, is there like a time or a role that stands out to you where you felt most fulfilled, where the position was you felt like, okay, this is alignment with me and it's not only it's also giving energy, right? And nourishment to me. Like that felt where you felt that you were totally on purpose.
Yeah, well, I would say that definitely when I was in practice of like of palliative care, of end of life care, and now. And I think that they're aligned, and here's why. So when I was an end of life nurse, it never fell short on me that I was there for a reason. Like, I really believe the universe sends you people in your life and you don't always know why. And sometimes you never figure it out. And other times, many years later, you'll be like, oh, now I understand why that person was in my life. I learned something and I got something from every patient that I cared for. Do I remember every single one of them? No. But what I loved the most was that I got to care for individuals at the last stage of their life. And I can tell you that when you're in the room with someone who's dying and they take that last breath, it is such an honor and such an intimate experience to be with someone when that happens, that that never fell short on me. And it never felt like a burden. It always made me go to work feeling like there's a reason I'm here. And I got to support the family. So that gave me that sense of connection with the family. More times than not, I would start my shift by going into the kitchen and putting on a pot of coffee, because I'd be, sitting down with the family saying, okay, where are we at today? What's changed since the last time I was here? So that they'd feel prepared and not afraid, and they would have a beautiful experience as much as I was able to give them around that whole process. My goal was always to leave and say, this is really hard and I'm sad and I'm grieving, but this was a really great experience. There was nothing that wasn't said that needed to be said. We got to spend time with this person. So for me, that was just a real sense of purpose, that I was there for a reason, and I was getting that ability to connect with family members and support them through a really difficult time, and being able to navigate this like really unknown charter territory with this individual while still allowing them to lead their own ship, even when oftentimes they were not communicative.
Wow.
So that's that big piece for me. Like, that there's just nothing else in my life has ever compared to that work experience. The work I'm doing now, though, is just, I think it runs so deep. And I think part of that is because of my age. I'm 52, and I'm really now starting to get to that stage in my life where it's not so much about leaving a legacy. It's really about understanding that everything we do leads us. It's like the breadcrumbs, right? Like, it's kind of picking up these breadcrumbs. And I feel like I'm at this place now where so many things are starting to make sense to me.
Mm.
The pandemic, I think, fast forwarded everything for me a little bit. And I can't even say it's because I had time, because at that time I was actually working 16 hours a day, every day, overseeing 3 long-term care homes and trying to keep over 500 people alive, literally alive every day. And so I didn't have time to make sourdough bread, and I didn't have time to get into the best shape of my life. In fact, I ate myself through COVID and probably gained 30 pounds. And I'm not knocking the people who were able to really like live their best life during that time, but that's not a time that I look back on fondly. And it actually was a time that I had my first sign of burnout.
Mm.
The reason why I think it's such a monumental time for me, though, is that it was the catalyst that caused this internal shift that said, I'm tired of saying no to the voice that keeps telling me there's something else. I
Yes.
always had it, and I kept telling her to shut the hell up.
So what was, because you had already started your leadership coaching.
Yeah, I started it, but I started it because my husband forced me to. I didn't really ever think it was going to be anything. I started it because I started to get into the sphere of people that were making me think about things that I'd always thought, "Pfft, that's woo woo. That's ridiculous. I can't buy." Like, if you would have told me 3 years ago that I'd be meditating every day, I would have probably given you the biggest inappropriate and disrespectful eye roll you'd ever have seen. Because I'm a science person. I'm not that I don't, I mean, it doesn't matter. If you want to do meditation, you do you. There was never a judgment, but I just was like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
Now I come at things from a completely different lens because I know it works. I know what the habit of gratitude can do to change someone's life. I have a vision board Not ever in my life have I ever picked a word of the year, but the last 2 years, one came to me and I couldn't say, "No, thank you." They came. Like, I just think that I'm in this different space now where I have opened myself up to the possibility that anything that I want at this stage, in terms of goals that I wanna set for myself that I've quieted for many years, are possible. They
Mm,
just are. And I know that now. And the 2 words of the year that I had made me believe that to be true. The first one I had in 2022 was surrender. And I hated that word. And I was mad that that word came because I had always considered surrender as a word that had a real negative connotation. It was always that you're giving up. If you're surrendering to something, you're giving up on something. So it took me several weeks before I finally had this awakening that that word for me actually meant that I had to learn how to let go of the things that weren't serving me so that I could create the space for the things that I was either not seeing were available
mm,
or that I wanted in my life. So then last year, this past year, 2023, shortly after the new year, a new word kind of came up out of nowhere, and it was believe. And I thought, okay, here we go again. I guess this is going to be 2 years in a row. Like, all right, I'm game for it now. What's this mean? And it took me a while. And what I came to, and it's not like some voice came and was like, hey, Michelle, guess what the word believe means? It was really just this, like, kind of realization that everything is a step. We're all just taking baby steps. And for me to be able to believe, I needed to be able to surrender first. I needed to be able to give up the things that weren't serving me so that I could create space to believe that other things were possible. I would have never been able to do one without the other. And so I want to help other people do that. I now that I know it's available and it's such an amazing feeling, I just want to help other people have some of that peace of mind. And it kind of just reminds me of the quote by Rumi where he says we're all just walking each other home.
mhm.
Like
Oh,
I just sort of feel like that's what we're here for. When one rises, we all rise. So like let's just get to work.
that is so true. I mean, Rumi, and he had a lot of gems, and like he speaks to my soul, that's for sure. And there's so I love what you're starting to talk about, like the beautiful work, how you pivoted and shifted and what you're doing now. But I want to ask you, so what was a voice telling you a couple years ago, right? And that you're meant for more, there's something more.
I don't know that I mean, if I think back, I to be totally honest, I can't actually say I had some sort of, like, deep meditation awakening where somebody came and gave me this download.
It could
I
be
hear people
scrolling.
talk about it, and I've never had that. I think where I came to was that I got tired of telling myself that the things that I wanted, I couldn't do because I knew that I could. And when, um, I've heard a mentor say this before that once you kind of go down the path of this self-development and self-exploration, you almost find out too much information that you can't go back and you can't unknow what you know to be true. And I think for me, I had just gone kind of all in on this, that I knew too much to say that the only reason you're not doing these things is because you won't get the hell out of your own way. That's it. And for me, it was fear-based. Like, I truly believe that oftentimes the only thing between where we are and where we want to be is the fear. Fear that I'm gonna try and I'm gonna fail, fear of what people are gonna think of me, fear that I'm not gonna be good at it, fear that I'm gonna create something and no one's gonna see the value or buy it, or people are gonna make fun of me. Who cares? And I
Mm,
don't say that flippantly because I still have those moments of caring, like caring deeply.
mhm,
But at 52, I care a little less. I
mhm.
care more about not being 62 and still being where I was 5 years ago and not having tried.
Right.
And I think that was like the thing for me is that I don't want to regret never trying. I'd rather fall flat on my face at 52 than to not have tried and then regret feeling like I missed an opportunity, which it isn't. You can try this at 82 or 92 and like really it's never too late. But my point being is that why waste another 10 years? I don't want to be where I was because there's no fun in that. So I don't know that I'm answering your question really well, but I think that was the biggest thing for me. The fear piece was more the fear that I wouldn't have ever tried.
I mean, I love it because I mean, it's kind of using fear in your favor because I resonate with this that if you find yourself, like how many times we find ourselves in the jobs and situations, right? In conversations where we're dreaming and we're like, well, I want to do this and this and that. But then a year goes by, 2 years go by, and you're just still talking about it, right? And in a way, it's almost safer. But I totally agree, is that try it, right? It takes courage, though, to try it, and then you have an answer. If that thing, that idea that you had in your mind, that you actually implemented it, right? That you actually went for it, it's a different feeling. Even
Mhm.
if it doesn't work out, it doesn't have to occupy your headspace. Then you have the conclusion, you kind of have the answer. And I feel like you respect yourself more
Yeah, absolutely.
doing
And I
it.
think that we measure our success on the backs of other people's success that we look at. So I I had this conversation with a really close friend over the summer. My husband and I went to their home for dinner and she's very successful. Like she doesn't have to work if she doesn't want to and they're just the greatest people on earth. Like I'm so grateful they're our close friends. And I was having this real candid conversation with her because in my mind, I had always created this narrative based on what I had seen of her starting her own business and where she's at now, making a very lucrative income, that it just sort of happened overnight, like maybe in a year or so. And then she had all these clients and stuff. And I was talking to her and she said, I had tried doing this business 4 years earlier and was frustrated by it and couldn't get clients and couldn't get traction and didn't want to sell and don't like selling. And her husband was, a little bit frustrated at her because she didn't want to do a couple of things and she kept working for other people during that time. I didn't know that.
Hmm.
So the perceptions we have of what we think other people's journeys are that we often compare ourselves to aren't even accurate. And then we
Yep.
feel like garbage. Like, oh, how come it can't happen for me? And so there's just, I think when you start to kind of be aware of these things, you start to open yourself up to catching yourself in the really early stages of that old thought pattern of thinking and saying, no, not today. Like, this isn't going to happen today. This is not how I'm going to show up for myself today. Even if I feel like I should be further down the runway than I am, I'm going to do one thing today to get me where I need to be tomorrow. And tomorrow, I'm going to do one more thing that's going to get me to the next day. We don't always end up on the path that we think we should be on. And sometimes there's a reason for that.
So I want to ask you two things. One is, if somebody else is having this pull on their heart, right? This yearning, this nagging, this annoying nagging sense, right? That
Mm,
must be something more, but they don't know which direction to go to. And the second question, as you were talking about, I want to know more, kind of, as you were in the pandemic that you were describing, you're in healthcare, in one of the tough, like you said, that was probably one of the most challenging industries to be
mhm.
in, or be in work related to that during that time. And what was it that you started doing differently?
Yeah. So, what could people do if they have the nagging feeling? Well, I think the first thing to be respectful is that I have to acknowledge that I have privilege, right? I had a great full-time job that allowed me to have an income while on the weekend and evenings to be able to play and explore what I wanted to do. So I think I just need to acknowledge that. Like, I'm never going to be somebody who tells a client that comes to work for me, quit your job and just go all in. Because if you're not all in, then it's just a hobby. Like, we've all heard that before. I don't typically like to say that other people are wrong, but I'll probably pretty closely say that if you have a coach that's telling you that, fire them, because the journey that you will have will be your own journey. And you need to do it in a timeline that makes sense for you, your family, or whomever are important people in your inner circle. And you need to do it in a way that's not going to jeopardize your quality of life. So go slow and easy. Like, we're really going for the long game here. It's not the sprint. And if you try the sprint, you're going to burn yourself out. Um, so not everybody's going to know what their why is and what the purpose is. And you can, I think, watch every Simon Sinek video and Brene Brown and all the people that I secretly think are my best friends. And that's not going to happen for some people. I just think that sometimes it's about having really intimate conversations with people that you can trust and who are going to tell you what they really think, and not what you want to hear, but knowing that it's coming from a place of love about, like, what am I good at? Because sometimes people see things in ourselves that we don't see. And so just having those conversations, like, what am I good at? What do I like to do? Or just what is that thing that's always been calling on my heart? Like, I want to be a skydiver. I want to be a professional skydiver, and you've never even taken a skydiving class. Then start there. Go take a skydiving class and see if you even like it. You might find out that you're afraid of heights and you hate it.
Mhm,
I mean, but I think that then there's other options. Well, maybe you're not going to be the one that's going to be jumping out of the plane with someone attached to their back, but you're going to be the person who's going to give people the confidence to do something really cool and fun. I
mhm,
think that we can still have parts of our dream and not actually be the one that's executing it. And that's why I mean by sometimes I think we find ourselves in places that we don't expect, because when we're not open to those things, we close ourselves off. And for me, that's what I needed to believe. Like, that was part of the belief thing. During the pandemic, what opened me up? I think that it was burnout. I found myself one day, I think I was doing dishes, and I started crying for no apparent reason. I didn't feel overly stressed. I didn't really feel like there was a reason, but I'm a real empath. Like, I can cry at a sad commercial. So my husband walked in the room, and I think he kind of hoped that maybe him and I had not made eye contact so that he could have walked out of the room. And, but he knew that I had seen him. And so I could tell he was horrified, like, he didn't know what to do, and he's like, I don't know what to do. You're crying, but I know it's not because you're doing the dishes. I know you don't like to do dishes, but that's not enough to make you cry, and I know you're also probably gonna tell me that you're fine, so I actually don't know what to do." And I did, and I told him, "It's fine, like, honestly, it's fine." And in that moment, I was like, "You cannot fall apart right now. You have over 500 people that are relying on you to kinda get it together. So shake it off and figure it out." And I did. But behind the scenes, I felt like someone had sucked my soul out of my body. Like, I just lost the sense of really just like and it was because I was tired. It wasn't because I didn't love the work and I didn't love my team. I love all of them. It was just that I was tired, and lost the love for what I was doing. When I was able to give myself the space to recharge my central nervous system and learn about what actual self care was and what the difference between stress and burnout is, and to stop using the word resilience because everybody thinks that if they just build more resilience, they'll be fine. And in fact, that's the worst thing you could do because your brain is not meant to be in a constant state of fight or flight. Being more resilient doesn't mean that you're doing a great job. It's like this badge of honor we carry as women often. And it really kind of just made me realize I can't sustain this and I don't want to anymore. And then I don't know who's got that quote, but it's when the student is ready, the teacher appears. All of a sudden, people like Kathy Heller and Joe Dispenza and all of these people started to kind of like show up in my social media, in books, like recommended books from Amazon, and these algorithms just started to kind of like, here you go.
She's
This is
open
what
now.
you yeah, this is what you need. Maybe try this. And that was just the beginning of the new path for me. And, if someone were to meet me now that hasn't seen me in 5 years, they probably wouldn't know there was any difference. Like fundamentally, I'm still the exact same person. It's not like I'm walking around with crystals around my neck and I'm so woo woo that I can't have a normal conversation. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about the how do I carry myself on the inside? How do I feel about who I am on the inside? How do I make sure that I can prioritize myself and still be that person who wants to give to other people and enjoy doing that? There doesn't have to be a zero sum in this. Like you can have the and, it's not an either or. It's, I think, just about acknowledging that things don't happen by accident. You create the space and the people and the experiences you have often because of situations you find yourself in that in some cases there's choice. In other cases, I mean, bad things happen to good people. And I'm not suggesting that good people find themselves in situations where they would have chosen something had they had that option.
Mm,
But I think that we also sometimes choose to believe that, well, not for me. That can be for everybody else, but that's not going to be for me. I have to be a mother, but I can't be this.
mhm,
Right? Like we put ourselves into these little boxes that
mhm,
say this is it. This is who I am and this is what I'm going to be forever and always. And there can't be anything else. And I think that we're always growing and learning and changing and there's different seasons to different times in our life. And right now at 52, I get to be a cool stepmom, and I get to be a cool wife, and I get to be a business owner, and I get to play in figuring out what it is that I want to do for the next 20 years of my life.
mm.
And that's going to give me the next level of goals, which is the house of our dreams, the ability to travel without having to worry about where I'm going to pay for the next trip, the ability to create experiences for other members of our family. Like, there's just so many things that I want, not just for myself, but for other people. My husband and I talk all the time about, and this is the funny thing. I'll just say this really quickly. My husband is not kind of the universe brings you things and you can have downloads kind of guy. And we found this beautiful home a year ago that we both fell in love with. It has not sold. It is a show home. It is not have has not gone up for sale. He now talks to me about when we're in the new house, when we buy our dream home, when we start the foundation that we've always dreamed about. I can't say that I've necessarily influenced him because I don't talk about a lot of those things in his presence because I just know it's not his thing. But I sure as heck know that I'm carrying myself different and I think differently and I use some of that language. It's rubbing off.
I love that.
Yeah.
I
And
love
I
that.
believe that that house is going to be ours. And I believe that we will have the foundation. And I do believe that we're going to be doing a lot of good things and we'll be able to travel and share a lot of these experiences with members of my family who can't do that on their own.
I love that. See, that is a
Yeah.
part of your why, right? And I want to ask, so okay, so what did you actually change? So here you are running operations, right?
Hmm.
When you have this awareness, thinking that you're sounds like burnt out.
Hmm.
So what did you change in your kind of day to day to get out of it?
Well, burnout is a tricky thing. I mean, it takes like significantly longer to come out of burnout than it does to get into it. So that journey is going to be really different for everybody. And I think for me, I realized I was in burnout pretty quickly. And so I was able to give myself some of the space that I needed and set some boundaries. So, things like I stopped working until 8 o'clock at night. I started to, eat more regular meals. I tried to get, a better sleep cycle, which has been really hard because I'm going through perimenopause. And so I kind of sleep whenever my body will let me sometimes. I think the best gift that I gave myself, probably about 6 months into this journey, was creating a bedtime and a morning routine. Like, that was a game changer for me. I came across the book, The 5 AM Club,
Okay.
and you don't have to get up at 5 AM to do this, but I always tell people they recommend kind of 3 aspects. So, when you create a morning or a bedtime routine, you want to do something that will, um, give you a sense of reflection. So either you're doing gratitude or some sort of journaling, or just thinking about setting the intention for the day, how you want to walk through your day. Then you want to do something that is going to provide you some sort of like educational information. So listening to a podcast like this one that you really, really like, or reading an article that's really interesting to you. And then the last part is moving your body. And so that doesn't have to be that you do a major workout. It could be going for a walk. It could be doing a light stretching exercise, whatever that is. And I started doing that every morning and then every evening, most nights. Um, and that was a game changer for me because it helped me start to prioritize myself, which then allowed me to create more time and space to do some of these things that I was afraid of trying, like creating a program and a course. I was like, who did you even think you are to create this program? And the first program that I launched, I put over 40 nurses through in a beta program
Amazing.
from a Facebook group because nobody knew who the heck I was. And nobody still knows who I am. Like, let's be real, I'm not like super famous. That was me posting a post that said, hey, I just created a leadership program. It's 14 weeks. Do you want to take this for free in exchange for some testimonials? 40 nurses signed up.
Amazing. See, that's a when you talk about breadcrumbs, right? Your one breadcrumb was when somebody asked you to do this, right? And your husband said you have a business,
Yeah.
right? Then this. So when somebody is on their true purpose, right? On that path of life's work, then is it those doors, like you get these kind of signs pretty easily, and that's what
Yeah.
you have to pay attention to?
I think you have to pay attention to them. Like, I know for me, like, and maybe that's just because I'm not super like intuitive in terms of like what's going on in my environment to be like, oh, maybe that's something I need to pay attention to. Like, I just don't know that I'm like that aware.
Mhm.
I think there are signs for sure. As I said, I think people and things come into your life for reasons, and we don't always know what they are in those moments. And sometimes we figure them out, and they're not always good. Sometimes it's for a lesson to be learned, and it's not always to our benefit. I think that some people are going to get really clear downloads, or they've always had this calling and this passion to do something, but I do think that for some people, it's going to be a little bit of like throwing darts at the wall for the first little bit and just seeing what resonates. And from that, I think it will lead you someplace. I have this program that I put a couple of women through last fall, and two of the women in the program, one was an artist and one, worked for the government. And the artist said, well, I just do paintings or whatever. And I said, you're an artist. Well, I can't really call myself an artist. I said, you create original artwork. You're an artist. Start
Mhm.
calling yourself that. The week after she finished my program, and I'm not saying this is because of me, I'm just saying that I think when we create the space in our mind to think about ourselves in different ways, doors open.
Mm,
She had her own gallery. Like she had like a gallery viewing, and I think she sold like a dozen paintings. People came from her circle of friends. She's like, I'm having a gallery showing. I don't know. I went to it. There's probably 80 people that went, and she sold most of her paintings. I'm like, so do you believe you're an artist now? She started laughing. She's like, "Yep."
I love that. And so it's very, even if somebody's like, right, might be thinking, if it's a situation where they don't embrace it fully, right?
Mhm.
The full scope or bigness, kind of opening up their eyes to what they're currently doing, how it can be bigger, or maybe somebody not seeing, right, that they are currently might be in a profession or a function, but that maybe like the road forward, maybe it's something in a different function, right? It's maybe big
Yeah.
what they're doing or that work or job that they're doing right now. How can people open up to the possibilities?
Well, I think so. The other woman that I gave the example of, she in so I did a lot of journaling with these women like in real time. And when sometimes they would share what they wrote, her journals, like in the 5 minutes that we would journal, she would write the most beautiful things that came to her during these like sessions that we all sort of were like, well, nobody wants to read her stuff now. And even though, I was teaching that we don't do that, but, there was just this kind of sense of like, this is not someone who's like, this is a gift. And so when I asked her, like, what is something you've always wanted to do? She has always wanted to be a lawyer to fight for women's rights. And she said to me, I have no desire to go to law school. So there's that part. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? And I said to her, but you're an amazing writer. So maybe you're actually not the lawyer who shows up in court to defend these women, but maybe you're the person who's writing the victim statements and you're the one who's writing what needs to be written to make change in parliament and you're writing the policies that are going to change people's lives. Like maybe you're working as part of that team, but you're not actually the one defending these things. And she's like, hmm. I said, there's tons of women's organizations that need people who are good writers, who are advocating and bringing forward an awareness of what's happening in this world. So, I think that it's really just about sometimes playing with it and saying, this is something I've always dreamed about doing. I'm just not sure that's the thing I want to do, but what could I do that's maybe tied to that, that's a wee bit smaller, that feels more accessible and attainable right now? And then it lets me test drive it and see if that's really where all of a sudden my heart just opens and says, "Yep, this is it." So get ready and buckle up because we're going full steam ahead on this one.
And it ties in a little bit to what you said about go try out, think about that thing that you are interested in, anything, skydiving, you said, it's an
Yeah.
example, but it could be um, from leading, if you imagine having a podcast, being a host, like just try it out or listen or kind of like record something, invite somebody for an interview, to um starting a business, maybe teaching just a webinar, right? Or salsa dancing. I mean, it could be anything because you just don't know where that door will open up, who you will meet, right? And where it will lead to next. It might not be that skydiving, it could be something else. You meet
Yeah.
somebody, right, and it opens up a whole nother set of doors or possibilities. So this is kind of like this journaling, this self-reflection, different prompts. It's kind of like playing around with it and opening up your own perspective and the possibilities. That is beautiful. So if you had to say right now, so you've done management, right? Like you
Mhm.
said, operational management, leadership coaching. Um, you have done like the workshop facilitation and written curriculum, s- all the way from being a nurse yourself. What is your what is that right now? What would you say is your from all of that? What would you say is your focus now and your purpose now that's calling like most to you?
Yeah, so this year, there seems to be this pull for me more around small group programming
Mhm.
and speaking. So kind of getting on stage and speaking, which I've done at conferences and things, but never in a professional capacity. So I'm sort of pushing myself into that space a little bit. And also, I'm writing a book. Yep. I never thought I'd hear myself say that out loud, but it's true. I am writing a book and I will have it written before the end of the year. So I think what I would probably say to people to piggyback on what you just said is that when you try new things that seem maybe ridiculous or scary, they start to feel almost fun because the more you try something and the more you grow and you think, oh, I could do that, and you do it, and you're like, well, that wasn't so bad. Like nothing bad happened. The next time something's presented to you, you're like, well, okay, I'll give it a try. Everything starts to feel a little less scary. I started a podcast too. I didn't ever, I like listening to them, never thought I would start one, never really wanted to start one, but I did because someone told me to, and I hated it. And the reason I hated it was because I was going on every single episode talking to this microphone by myself. And I felt like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to create a monologue on what it's like to be a good leader. And I hated every minute of it. I was forced to take a break for a year because one of our dogs died and I was grieving and I just didn't want to do it. So I said, okay, well, not now. It'll put it on pause and I'll come back. I came back a year later and I said, something needs to change. The change was that I needed guests. I needed that sense of connection. I love to chat if you haven't noticed. I have the gift of gab. It wasn't fun because I was sitting here by myself for an hour. As
Mhm.
soon as I started inviting guests in, like that was a game changer for me. Now I've interviewed Olympic athletes. I've interviewed doctors that have like been on world renowned stages, that have been interviewed in major news broadcasts, that are TEDx speakers. These are the people that in some ways I aspire to become. I would love to become a TEDx speaker at some point. I'd love to write my own book. So when you start to surround yourself with people like that have that energy, it's not about comparing. It's about just being in the space and the energy of that make you think, well, if I can do this, I can try that thing. It's not even about, is that thing going to make me money? Like now I don't even do things because I think, oh, well, is that in the right direction for my business? Because it might not make me money. Making a book is not going to make me money. Like, let's be real. I would like to think that Webster and Schuster or some big publishing company is going to discover me and give me this huge sum of money so that I can go right near a lake and live this like amazing life as a writer. And that's not going to happen. I might sell a couple of books and self publish it, but I don't care because I've always wanted to do this. And now I really want to do it. And if I want to become a speaker, I know that speakers that have books have more credibility. The speaker thing might be the thing that makes me the money. The book is just the thing that I've wanted to do and might be the caveat to help a couple of doors open, like you said. So I think it's not always about making the money and it's not always about doing something for that reason. But I think that when you can try new things and you realize you're not going to die and it's okay and you can get through it, it makes trying other new things more fun and less scary.
I love that. I mean, so your podcast is called Lead from Within.
Yeah.
And you're definitely an example. I was just saying, I mean, Michelle is leading from within. She is leading herself. And it's amazing the capacity that you have and all the things that you have done and all the things that you're doing and the new territories you keep venturing into. I mean, it takes tremendous courage and strength and capacity to do that. Um, what drives you?
I don't know. That's a great question and thank you for that. I mean, I will say this is that everything that I've done up until this point has happened on evenings and weekends because I had a full-time job. And I'm very ethical in that I will not do something for myself if I know that I'm on someone else's time clock. So all of this has been done kind of evenings and weekends. So it has meant that there's been some sacrifices where, I'll be upstairs in my office in the evening recording episodes or podcast episodes, or I'm working on putting together a new course and I'd much rather be downstairs sitting with my husband. So there has been sacrifice, but I think the drive more, again, when I really truly think about it, it's really more about not wanting to have the regret of not at least giving myself an opportunity to have tried. And I used the excuse for years that I didn't have enough time. And I'm telling you that we have two, my husband and I have two grown children. They're my stepchildren, but I think of them as my own. We don't have, we have a dog, which, he's a Velcro dog. So he takes up a lot of my time, but we don't have kids at home. There's, I have more time and space than the vast majority of people that I know. If you want something, there is time in the day. And I don't say that from a place of privilege. I say that from a place of speaking as a woman to often many other women who put their self care on hold and say, nope, don't have time because I have a kid who needs help with a homework and I have dinner to put on the table and I have a dishwasher that needs to be emptied and I need my house to look like a Pinterest board and all the things. And at the end of the day, nobody cares about any of it. If you give your kids craft dinner 3 times a week next week, they're going to think you're an awesome mom. If you forget about the laundry and instead you have a dance party in your living room, that's what they're gonna remember. They're not gonna remember the fact that your house was spotless. So I think that sometimes, again, it's the stories we tell ourselves about how we prioritize what's important in our life. And for me, the drive is the shift to say, do I want to spend my time sitting downstairs on my laptop watching YouTube videos, or would I rather be in my office watching a YouTube video teaching me how to put a course on my website?
Mhm.
There's just a subtle shift. This year I said I want to read more books this year. And so I was like, well, how do I find time to do that? Well, I usually find myself at night before bed. I shouldn't do it, but I do sometimes on my iPad. I start watching videos. So I said, I'm going to take that 30 minutes and I'm going to read as many pages in a book as I can in 30 minutes. I'm just subbing out something else that's more aligned with where I am right now and what I want in terms of my goals. That's all. So that's what I mean. I think that when you put like those like that bedtime and morning routines in place, it allows you then to swap out things. So, if working out every morning, like right now, I was sharing with you, my husband's helping me lose some weight. We bought a whole gym thing and we're weightlifting in our garage together because we call that our in-home gym. It's really our garage. um, I'm not working out in the morning because I'm doing an hour of weightlifting and walking on my treadmill every night. So I'm not, I've now, so now if I was following that morning routine, that's actually kind of opened up 20 to 30 minutes for me to find something else to put in that time slot. And some mornings I'm going to lay in bed a little longer and be grateful that I can.
Mhm.
There's other mornings where maybe I'll do a longer meditation or I'll grab my Kindle and read a couple pages of a book. So I think it's kind of a combination of those two things.
It's to play around, right? Because
Yeah.
practices and habits also can get like to be a to-do, a heavy responsibility that kind of can become a weight, right? A heavier weight is the best word that comes to me right now.
Well, I think a lot of people think that if they don't do it one day, they've failed.
Yeah, the pressure that we
And
put.
again, that's mindset. Who told you that was a rule? You created that rule for yourself. This is like me for years. I lived in the space of like with trying to diet, and I don't want to trigger anyone, but this was a big thing for me where is like if I fell off kind of my diet plan midweek, I would always say to myself, well, I'll just start again on Monday. Why? Start again tomorrow. Like now I'm like, that's why would I wait 3 or 4 days to start again? Like that's ridiculous. But I would create this narrative. Well, I screwed up and I can only start on a Monday. No, you can't. You can start any day you want. It's just a reset. And I also tell myself, give yourself a little bit of grace. You actually decided you wanted that piece of pie. That was a decision you made. Tomorrow, maybe you'll make the decision that you're going to have a piece of fruit instead.
Mhm.
You didn't fail. You chose to put something in your mouth, and that was the consequence. So that's fine. You can choose differently tomorrow. So you didn't fail.
Mm.
Like I think sometimes we put these like roadblocks and these rules that we create in our own minds, and
Yeah.
then we set ourselves up for failure before we even make an attempt. Out of the gate, we're already like, well, like you're not going to succeed. So why are you even bothering?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we if you have that cake, and I know, like, it's just a stupid narrative, and the pressure and perfectionism and whatever self-sabotage mechanisms is like, when you have that piece of cake, enjoy it. Don't then use that against yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that again, we don't realize how much our behavior impacts the choices we make. I read an article, actually no, it's not true. It was a guest on my podcast, and she's an intuitive like diet coach,
Okay.
and she was telling me that there's actual research that shows that if you're, say, driving to work every day and there's like a McDonald's on your way to work and you've stopped in there on a few occasions because you like want that Egg McMuffin or whatever it is in the morning, anytime you're feeling, if you're an emotional eater, anytime you're feeling that there's a loss of control in your life or you're feeling not worthy of something, guess where you're going to pull in? You're going to pull into the McDonald's.
Mm.
And so some of it is that the food is addictive, it's
So
made to be addictive, but also we start to wire our brains to look for outlets that will support the bad behavior. And so sometimes it's really just about switching things up. So that was like, that resonated with me because that was me for a long time. So I just started driving a different route to work every morning.
I love
That's
that.
all I did, and it actually was it was better and faster and easier, but I just said, like, I physically did not feel like I had the control to stop myself to do that in that time in my life. There were so many other things going on, and, learning about this now, I was like, "Well, that would have been helpful a long time ago," but the only thing I knew I could do was just take a different route to work, which is what I did, and it helped me. So, I say that just because I think that sometimes we create these narratives and these stories that we can't be something we want or have something we desire because of all of these things. And really, there's times when it's just about the fact that we put these barriers in front of ourselves, because it's sometimes it's safer to say I can't have it because of this than to say I can't have it because I'm afraid to try.
But isn't that always, I'm just thinking, like,
Yeah.
staying in a job where you feel like you're not answering kind of that tug, that pull on your heart for something more, because you have the security, the salary, the people you know, right? Flexibility. We tell ourselves all these things.
Mhm.
That's just one example. Why not go for what we're really scared to go for and try,
And I
right?
think if you can do that safely, then yeah, go for it. Like, if you can quit your job and not risk losing a roof over your head and not be able to like feed yourself or your family or those that rely on you, go for it. Live that dream. Like, go off and be merry and live the best life. And if that's not an option right now, then do what you can. Because when you're working on something else, it doesn't make, I can speak from experience, you don't feel like you're losing a part of your soul every day. And I think that when you can try to start to set some timelines for yourself to say, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna give myself 2 years to
Mhm.
try to get this thing off the ground, and I'm gonna play with it a little bit, but I'm also not gonna half-ass it. Like I'm actually gonna give this a shot. I'm gonna really put everything into this, and I'm gonna give it my all in the time that I have.
Mhm.
Then I think that that often is the extra little push that people need to say, if nothing's happened at the end of these 2 years,
Mhm.
maybe it's not that you're giving up on the dream, but it's time to reflect and shift and look at like, okay, well, maybe there's something else. Like maybe I missed something along the way. And that's where I think having other women and other people that are a little further down the runway than you can be like really great mentors and supports where you can have someone who will hold you accountable, that when you say you're going to do something, you actually follow through and do it, like the accountability group we're in. When I say I'm going to write for one at minimum of 1 hour or 2 hours every Sunday, I
Mhm.
better make sure I do it, because while that group is supportive and they're not going to make me feel bad if I say I didn't do it, I don't want to be that person that says I didn't want to do it because I was the person who asked them for help in the first place.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's my dream and my goal. If I don't even want it bad enough to find 2 hours on a Sunday to write, why should they care?
Yeah.
It makes me not want to be that person. It makes me want to write for 2 hours and not tell them I did it when I didn't,
Mhm.
you know? So I think that some of those pieces, when we can give ourselves some timelines, when we can give ourselves grace and to ask for help.
Mhm.
I have and I'll use this as an example, myself as an example, because I don't have it all figured out either. I really want to start acquiring some consulting contracts with government stakeholders. Here in Canada, the online system is like not easy to navigate.
Okay.
And I've done the first 5 steps of kind of getting on the list and being an approved vendor that can do business with the government in Canada. But navigating the website for RFP opportunities is like painstaking. It makes me want to rip my eyelashes out. Like, it's awful. My closest friend, who is like a sister to me for years, worked in a senior level position in the government of Canada in procurement services. I don't know why I had never asked her. A month ago, I was on the phone with her and I said, I think I need help with this. Can you help me either figure out how to set up so that I know when new contracts are becoming available, or how to even filter to find out what's there? She said, I kind of love doing this. Can I just do it for you? And I said, I'll pay you. She's like, if you ever say that to me again, I'm hanging up the phone on you. I want to do this because I want to support you.
Mm.
Okay, thank you. She's now starting to like text me like, well, here's something. Take a look at it and tell me if I'm on the right track. Is this sort of what you're looking for? It's about asking for help and using the resources you have to figure it out. It's not always about just trying to struggle to do it yourself. And that was me. That was me probably for the first year of doing this. I am stubborn and I was like, if I can't figure it out, then I'm not going to do it.
Mm.
And I would usually figure it out. And then I would regret that I spent 20 hours trying to do something that I could have asked someone for help and they probably could have told me how to do it in 5. So when your time is limited, you also have to be smart about what you're doing and to love the time that you're spending. You're not going to love it every single time. Like, I don't, today I have to do some stuff on my website. I don't love that. That doesn't bring me joy. That's not a part of my business that I love to do. But I do love crossing items off of a to-do list. And that's going to give me about 7 things that I can cross off. And I'm going to feel really good at the end of the day that I did things for my business that have been sitting on that to-do list for probably 4 or 5 weeks that I've been telling myself are going to be hard and I'm not going to like them. And I've been procrastinating. And today's the day they're going to get done and I'm going to feel really good about it.
And you held up the promise to yourself, right?
Mhm.
Kind of like that ties into that accountability that you were talking about. And I did like you mentioned grace, right? And some of the other things you mentioned, it made me remember in the beginning of our conversation, you spoke about learning what real self-love is.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know that I can articulate it, but I can tell you that things are starting to show up in my life that make me feel like, what did I do to deserve this? That I feel are kind of the nuggets of self love. And I'm embracing them and not pushing them away. So, like the first example that I think of is I have a really close friend who I've nursed in Haiti with for years, and she's a huge traveler. And when her and I went to Chicago on a girls' week in the summertime for our birthdays, she said, I'm going to Africa in April and May with my cousin and his husband and their friend Celine from Paris. Do you want to come? And I like said, yeah. But I was like in my brain, I'll be honest, instantly was like, you're not going. But I
Really?
said, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to go. Cause it was true. I would love to go. And I came home and I started talking to my husband about this, who also knows that I have this weird affection for elephants. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from. I just love them. Baby elephants. Come on. If you don't like a baby elephant, we'll never be able to be friends. Um, and he said to me, you're going to Africa. And I said, excuse me? This is a really expensive trip. He says, I know, and you're going. We'll figure it out. He said, I would go with you because I love you. And I know that this is a bucket list trip for you. But he's like, I don't actually want to. Like, it's not a trip that I want to go on. But I know that you're going to go with people who I know. You're going to be safe and you're going to have an amazing time. And you're never going to get an opportunity like this again. So you're going. Guess who's going to Africa in 3 months? For a month.
Amazing.
Yeah. I would never have done that even a year ago, a year and a half ago. Nope. I would have argued with him. Even when he said you're going, I would have been like, no, I would have come up with every reason I could not have gone. And this time I had some anxiety around it, which I had to work through. But I didn't argue with him because I really wanted to do this. And do you know now that I'm getting to the point where sometimes I almost get emotional, like I'm buying things for this trip and I'm sort of like socking them away, things that I know I'll need. And I almost get emotional because I can picture myself in Africa wearing a certain piece of clothing or a hat or a pair of boots that I've had to buy or a scarf that's going to protect me in the morning when it's really, really cold and below zero and the camera that I bought so that I could take pictures of all this wildlife.
Mhm.
And the mornings, because I've seen the way the sun rises in Namibia in the morning, and knowing that I'm going to be there and I'll be able to journal. And, we're doing a hot air balloon ride at sunrise over the desert. And
Mm.
I get shivers like all over my body when I think about that because I can't wait to experience those things and I'm not resisting it.
I can feel the realness of it.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, they say that when we close our eyes and we can put ourselves in a state where we really believe we're there, your brain doesn't know the difference.
Mm.
So for me, like, I feel like I'm already experiencing that, but I know that like I've already said to everybody that I'm going with, listen, you're going to be sitting in the safari truck with the girl who's going to cry the first time she sees a baby
Oh.
elephant. So I'm warning you, this is what you're in for.
Mhm.
Um, it is going like I'm going to cry my way through this trip in a sense of gratitude and being overwhelmed with being able to experience the things that I know are going to come my way. And it's going to be in such and for such a different reason than it would have been 6 months ago or a year ago or a year and a half ago, because now I feel like I can appreciate it for what it's supposed to be, which is just I'm going on a trip of a lifetime and I have the privilege of being able to do that. And there's nothing else. There's nothing else other than I get to go on this trip and live that experience. That's it. I
With
would have never had that perspective a year and a half ago. And this trip would have been an amazing trip because I wouldn't have known any different. But I would have come back making it something different than it was. And for me, this is probably going to be one of the most impactful and visceral experiences I have because I just know that I'm just going to like see what the universe is going to give me.
So what came to me as you were sharing this is because you have an open heart
Yeah.
or with
I mean,
an
I feel like I've always had an open heart, but I agree with you. I think it's open in a different way now. It's open to all possibility, not the ones that I think are possible.
right. It's not just with your mind,
Yeah.
but with a full open heart to this life.
Yeah.
Love that. And I have to say, I have to give kudos to your husband. You have picked a great one. Are
I
you
know. I
sharing how
know.
you guys met?
Yeah, so we met online. We met in 2010 online.
Yeah.
And so we've been together since 2010 and we got married in 2007. We rented out our favorite winery in the Okanagan for the weekend and brought all of our friends up there and got married in a winery poolside. And then, and they have like a big dining room and reception, and we enjoyed it. He will tell you that he reached out to me first, which is a lie. It's not true. I reached out
Were
to
you
him
on
first.
Bumble?
Yeah, I said that at our wedding. I'm like, anyone who's heard the story from Mark that he reached out to me first, it's a lie. It's not true. I reached out to him.
But you
But
picked him.
again,
You picked him on
I
the
picked him. Yeah.
swiped right.
And, here again, this is the thing I talk about when you are open. I had been on that site for maybe 2 years. And I dated a lot. I literally was throwing darts at a wall because I had had a lot of really bad relationships where I had been verbally abused and badly, and I didn't know who I was or what I wanted anymore. And the people that I was drawn to, I knew weren't the people that I needed to be around. And I remember the first date that him and I went on, and I came back and I went for lunch with a girlfriend the next day and I told her all about it. And it was amazing. And when we were leaving the restaurant that first night, it was raining, and he put his hand on the small of my back just to sort of like say, wait here, I'll go get the car from across the street. And I said, no, no, it's fine. Like, I don't mind walking. It's just across the street. And when he put his hand on the small of my back, I literally felt like some sort of weird tingle. And I thought, well, that's something I've never felt before. He
Mm.
proposed at that same restaurant years later. And when I was telling a friend that story the day after our date, she's like, well, it sounds like, and it was an amazing night, but there's some like, trepidation in your voice. And I said, yeah, he's a super nice guy, but I just don't know if like he's the one. And she said to me, he's different than every other person you've been dating up until now. And how's that been working out for you? Like, well, not well. She said, do me a favor, go out on 2 more dates with him. And if you still feel the same way, then don't waste his time and just tell him you're not interested. I don't know that I would have gone out with him again if
Mm.
I didn't have someone to be like, stop being such an ass. I mean, I probably would have because he was awesome and I really liked him a lot and I wanted to see him again. So I probably would have. That's not true. But I'm just saying, like, I think that conversation, again, having people that will tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear,
Mhm.
is really important in your life. But I had also during that time I met some really amazing men. I date men, so I had met a lot of really amazing men, some of which I'm still friends with. Some were duds and awful human beings. And I had said, I'm going to give myself 1 more year on this site. And if I don't find someone, I'm coming off. I'm happy with my life. I don't need somebody in my life to make me happy. I've got great friends, a great job. I'm going to come off. As soon as I sort of declared that, I met him 3 weeks later. And he had been on the site. Like I asked him, I'm like, were you new? And he's like, no, I've been on here for like over a year. We had never been connected. And we had a lot of things in common, like weird things in our profiles that you would think an algorithm would have connected the dots to.
Yeah.
And we were never connected. So I never at that time thought, oh, that's the universe or whatever, because that's not the place that I was in. Now I'm like, that didn't happen by accident.
Mm.
And the gentleman that I was dating before I moved to BC moved to Seattle. And I thought about moving to BC to be closer to him which would have been a mistake. And I remember my friend, my closest friend, who I mentioned earlier, said to me, "Listen, go for a year. If you don't like it, come home. Like, this is not the end of the world. You're overthinking this. Like, you can always come back if you don't like it, but don't go for him. Do this for yourself."
Mhm.
If I would have never met him and he moved to Seattle, I would have never moved here and I would have never met my husband. Would I have met somebody else? Maybe. I don't know. But I just don't think like these are the breadcrumbs. I mean, these are the things that I just say. Like, I just don't think that they sometimes just happen. Like, sometimes we have to just listen to the quiet whisper and do the scary thing and know that I have options on that. Like, I could come home. Would it have been ideal? No. Would have had cost me money? Yes. But at the end of the day, I had family and friends that were there to support me and would have made sure that I was okay. So I don't know. Like, I think I just look at those things in a different light now that I'm in the place that I am now. Back then, I would have just thought, "Well, it's not, it's just coincidence or whatever. That's just life." Like, that's not, one doesn't have to do anything with the other. And I don't know that I necessarily believe that now.
Oh my God. So I just finished reading this book, The Alchemist.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've read it,
I have.
but one of the quotes from The Alchemist is the words luck and coincidence. It's with those words that the universal language is written.
There you go.
So amazing. Michelle, thank you so much. Oh my God. So many things. And I could keep talking to you. And I
I
thought
know.
for
I
way
could too. And
long.
at least I know that I'm gonna see you again in the, recent or in the near future, but I feel bad if you've got to edit this down a little bit. But yeah, this was such a pleasure. I could keep talking with you about this all day long, and I just so appreciate you having me here and
Oh my God.
having to be able to have this conversation with your community. And yeah, it's been fantastic. It's a great way to end my afternoon for sure.
Amazing. Can you tell people how can they find you? How can they connect with you and follow you?
Yeah, thank you. So probably the easiest place you can go is just on my website, which is curisconsulting.ca, and it's CURIS. It's a CA because I'm in Canada. So everything, all my links are there. I have a podcast. The podcast is there as well. So if you just go there, all things that I'm doing, you'll find there.
I love it. And the
Yeah.
podcast is Lead from Within.
Correct. It's Lead from Within. Yeah. And I have weekly episodes on Sundays. And then on every Wednesday, I have what I call is a mini bonus sort of, it's just a mini dose of inspiration, I think I call them, which is just like a quote of the week. And those go on Wednesdays.
I love that.
Thank
I
you.
definitely encourage everyone to check out your podcast and start from there or wherever you want to start. I will include the links in the show notes, but I think you are living the talk. So you're literally, everything that you shared is leading yourself first. So leading from within. I love it. I admire you and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same way. So thank you so much. It's because of people like you in my circle now that I'm forever grateful. So thank you so much.